Okay, should be business. All right, thanks, Dan. And then for the mic, so all we have to do is turn this on and it'll be live.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Cool.
Check.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Daniel Wharton. I'm from Amino Payments. We're a Philly-based startup. We operate right upstairs. We are working on a solution to problems in the digital ad supply chain. We leverage blockchain, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a little bit of background on the internet advertising space. I don't think anybody needs a blockchain 101, so I'll skip that. But I will be covering topics of blockchain, internet advertising, and some basic systems engineering stuff. So if you have questions at any time, you can bring them up. There isn't generally a lot of people in the audience that have overlap with all those three, but if you do happen to, I'd love to see your resume. So you can leave that with me on the way out. We are hiring, though, so if anyone has interest in Amino, please see me after. So a lot of people probably have some idea of how ads are bought and sold on the internet. So this is my awesome pants company, and I'm approaching Philly Mag to buy some advertising on their site, so people want to buy my awesome pants. You may think that I just go to Philly Mag or the publisher and I offer them $100 and get 100,000 ads in return, but that actually is not how it happens. There are a series of parties in between. So I'm likely to have like an agency, and that agency will represent me in the market. They may turn to a DSP. That's a demand-side platform. They often they interact with the agencies and brands to act as a middleman to purchase ads from other parts of the chain. So that DSP then may go to an exchange, and that exchange may buy ads from an SSP, which is a supply-side platform. And as you can expect, they represent the publisher side. So that's who Philly Mag generally interacts with. There isn't a lot of insight. So you usually can only see like one step away. So I may only know my interactions with the agency. I would not necessarily know what happens anywhere else in the chain. So that's a big problem. It creates all kinds of opportunities for bad things to happen. It only takes a little bit of digging to find plenty of articles and whatnot on the problems. I will discuss several of them. The big problem that we see is there is no transparency or source of truth. So, and there's no party can go and get information on everything that's occurring in the entire supply chain from one source. They may make attempts to collect data from various parties, and they'll get some information, but usually that doesn't work out too well. So because of that, you end up seeing a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And also discrepancies. And discrepancies lead to a lot of fighting over who owes how much money between parties. So what that ends up meaning is there's a long, drawn-out reconciliation process. Companies may go months without getting paid, and often don't get what they actually think they deserve. So I'm going to talk through some problems with examples, but I'm not trying to point fingers at any particular parties or even groups of parties. In fact, at Amino, we have no interest in judging any parties in the supply chain. We're all about just bringing transparency and allowing whoever's involved in the transaction to make their own decisions. So this next thing here is basically my interaction with the supply chain. So I call up Philly Mag, and I'm like, so I spent $100 to place ads on your site. How much did you receive? And Philly Mag says, I received $30. And I'm wondering, where did that $70 go? So Then I hop on and I try and collect data from the DSP, Exchange, and SSP, and I'm like, how much money did you guys keep? And they all give me some figures, and I'm like, wait a second. Oh, shoot. Skip the slide. OK. So the numbers don't actually end up adding up. I'm still missing $40. And this actually does occur. We've spoken with very large companies that do a lot of advertising, and they've actually had a project where they went around to every party, and they're like, give me your logs, give me all the transactions, and at the end of the day, 40% of the money was still missing from the system. So there is really no source of truth. So how can waste, fraud, and abuse occur? There are inefficient routes to publishers. So you saw that long chain. There are many ways that that advertisement could have been purchased, some of them more efficient than others. Inventory can be bought and resold with no value added. So there are people that have made their living, a very, very good living, just buying inventory from exchanges and reselling it back, the exact same inventory, into the same exchange. It was uncovered there were some people making literally hundreds of thousands of dollars per day doing that. Also, a lot of parties will have undisclosed fees. Domain spoofing occurs. So I may buy a bunch of ads, let's say 100,000 on Philly Mag, but 20,000 of them may have been served on some botnet. And the traffic is then generated by bots. Sorry. So yeah, hidden fees can happen all throughout. You can think of like your cell phone bill or your cable bill. You may buy at the advertised price of $50 a month, and you get a bill and it's $63. The same kind of thing could happen here, although it's more opaque. Like that is not actually disclosed, so you don't even know that it's occurring. This is just a little bit about domain spoofing, which I already mentioned. When some data was collected, there were way more impressions than actual legitimate inventory. So what is appealing about blockchain for this problem? I think a lot of it could be obvious. We can use it to provide a transparent source of truth. So we can have a one-stop shop to get all this data. Everyone has an identity that can't be faked. So if you are trying to spoof Philly Mag, we provide an identity. So if you don't provide the correct identity, your transaction is invalid. Or if you do provide the correct identity, we're still going to pay Philly Mag. So your incentive is then gone. So we can, in advance, come up with reconciliation terms. And those can be placed into smart contracts so that when reconciliation occurs, it is then automated and streamlined. So we've certainly run into some challenges. For one, the volume of internet advertising is massive. We're talking millions of transactions per second, and we may receive 3 or more transactions per ad impression, which could add up to tens of millions. Cryptocurrency volatility is not something that most of the companies we're dealing with would want to engage in, so they don't want to have to worry about the price change of the currency in addition to the ad purchasing. Also, most companies are not ready to integrate blockchain at this time, so we need to provide an easy path for them. And companies want privacy, so they don't want to share their trade secrets on how they're buying or selling ads because their competitors could use that information against them. So how do we deal with the high volume transactions? We split our stack into 2 parts. One off-chain centralized ledger. This is ready for ad tech scale. It's modular, so as more stuff, as blockchain continues to develop, we can move more and more components over to it. Also, as our customers become more prepared. You guys probably won't think it's as cool as a decentralized ledger, but it works really well for us right now. And it's actually all still very cool technology. And then we have Hyperledger, which we use as a means to connect with our customers on data. We also use it for the automated reconciliation and payment settling. We did not do any kind of ICO, and we instead tied our currency to the value of the US dollar. So 1 grain in our system is worth 1 nanocent of US dollars. So this is a very flexible currency, and it's non-volatile. We could have very small transactions, and we could pay out in any currency. Right now, we only do fiat, but we could switch to cryptocurrencies as well. So in order to help our customers get up to speed, we do a lot of the heavy lifting. We start them out on traditional technologies, and then we do a gentle iterative transition to actual direct blockchain engagement. With Hyperledger Composer, it's really easy to start coding. That works well for us, but also any customers that want to get involved. And IBM Cloud makes it easy to spin up your own nodes, which works well for us as well, and our customers. This is our high volume stack. Sorry, these blockchains are making me thirsty. So this is our high volume stack. You'll find a lot of very traditional high volume infrastructure here. We receive, well, also you'll see quite a bit of kind of primordial blockchain component soup mixed in with everything. We have here represented 3 different types of transaction that we receive. We do receive a few others, but these are the big ones. The obvious one is pay. So that's an actual payment. We provide an SDK to our customers that allows them to sign their transactions so we can verify they are who they say and that they intend to actually commit this payment. Then you see here the ad calls. Those are actual pixels that get served inside of apps, also alongside of ads on websites. And this is a beacon back to us so that we know the actual ad occurred. This can aid us later in reconciliation. Separately at the top, this might be an unfamiliar group of companies for you, but we receive verify calls from verification providers. And they are, the ones here are IAS, Integral Ad Science, and White Ops. And they do things like determine, was the ad actually seen? Was it at the bottom view it, or did a human view it? They also can determine the context of a page to make sure it meets all the requirements of the advertiser. And all these calls come in very high volumes via HTTPS into our traditional app server stack. These are very simple machines. They're just built for speed. All they have to do is receive these calls and commit them to our stream batch system. So inside here, we're doing a bunch of stuff. What you see forming are what we call amino chains. These are kind of like Merkle tree structures. Each one represents 1 transaction. And inside there, we're joining things together. We're ordering. We're matching up the ad and the pay calls and the verify calls. And once it comes out the other end, it goes right into our centralized ledger. That's the Amino ledger there. So this is the structure I was just talking about previously, and that was being built inside of our streaming microservices. So what this is this represents a single impression, and along with that, all the payments that occurred. So you can see a brand bought through the DSP exchange SSP publisher. 1 impression was served, and you can see how much money moved between each party. So this goes back to what we were talking about before. Obviously, there's great transparency here. And you might think, so if I am a bad actor, why would I actually provide correct information here? And the reason is we pay on this same information. So if you're a DSP and you say, I intend to give the exchange 90 grains, but you really only intend to give them 70, we're actually going to pay them 90 grains. So it really helps as a sort of enforcement mechanism. What is really awesome about amino chains is if you stack a bunch of them on top of each other, you can get these really beautiful graphs. So this is really a great way to provide transparency into the whole chain, the whole supply chain. And we build this stuff in real time in our centralized ledger. Customers, we actually provide a web UI where customers can see this data in near real time. They could select various time ranges and get awesome reports or visualizations. They're really loving that. So from there, we now have a bunch of these chains pooled up in our centralized ledger. And we chunk them up into hourly batches. And then those hourly batches, we use some tools we wrote in Composer. And we push them up into our Hyperledger fabric, which we host with IBM. Let's take a look at what happens. This is a more Hyperledger-centric view. So at the top, you see a bunch of brands. So AT&T and Bayer, these are actual advertisers that we work with. DoubleClick Bid Manager is a Google property. They operate as a DSP. We mentioned those before. AppNexus here is acting as an exchange and an SSP. And then we have a few publishers. These are companies that own many web properties. So that's a whole chain there. And then this just goes back. You have the event data, which goes through our high throughput system and into the Amino ledger. That's the centralized one down there. You can see all those parties are also on some shared ledgers. We have a ledger for smart contracts, which allows companies to basically advertise the terms they're agreeable to for buying and selling ads. And they can do that publicly or privately, so they can share it with everyone or just specific parties. So those contracts can get used later. So at this point, we have a bunch of blocks pulled up here. So we're going to commit the hourly chunks into our channel-based ledger. The channel-based ledger is basically kind of a private ledger with various customers. And the information they get there is basically chain data that they're involved with. So any chain that they have a seat on, they have access to in this shared ledger. But before it makes it into the channel-based ledger, we do contract execution. And this determines if it's payable or not. You can see back, we have a reference to IAS and white ops. We use them a lot in smart contracts. So basically, all these parties can agree that certain metrics provided by IAS and white ops need to occur for payments to be executable. So we can make that determination on hourly blocks and determine at this point whether or not it's payable. So this really helps with the reconciliation part of things. It makes it much quicker. So just a little bit on why we like Hyperledger. As an active OSS community, we like being involved in open source. We like getting support and providing support into the community. So that's working really well for us. We generally choose those types of projects for everything we do. They're business focused, so they take things like privacy into consideration, which is very important for our customers. And Hyperledger Composer, I mentioned this before, makes it really easy for us to write tools, but also it benefits our customers as well. If they want to engage our Hyperledger, they can write their own tools pretty easily. And then IBM Cloud takes a lot of the work off our customers' plates. If they want to spin up some infrastructure, they can just kind of dip their toe in without spending too much time or resources on going into that endeavor. So again, that just goes back to how we're trying to get more companies involved in blockchain, and this will allow us a great path to that. That's pretty much it. I'm definitely open to any questions if anyone has any regarding what we do with blockchain or advertising or anything like that. Yeah.
Can you go back to the slide with the verification piece on it, 2 slides back?
Oh, this one here? Sorry. That one? Yeah.
When you do the contract execution, you're saying that that's the 1-hour blocks that are actually being verified
Yeah.
in the data vendor. If any of the transactions in that block fail, does the whole block fail, or do you fail the individual transaction?
Now that block has to meet the requirements. So if it's as an example, if it needs to be at least 80% human, 70% viewable, it applies to that whole block. As it works right now, there's generally a really lengthy conversation that occurs. So they'll end up with like end of month information that they're working with, and it's just a really long battle, and they'll fight over dollar amounts. This allows us to break it down into like single hours, so it's much easier. Yeah.
So why can't the publisher and the advertiser directly talk to each other when they need to have the exchange in between?
Sure. I mean, in theory, they could, but oh, yeah, absolutely. So she asked why can't the advertiser and publisher directly communicate and set up a relationship and start serving ads that way directly? And the reality is neither generally has the resources to do that. So ad serving is like a pretty intense endeavor to get into. So a lot of, almost very few publishers would spend the money to build the infrastructure to do that. So they always end up using an SSP or an exchange to do that for them. And then naturally, advertisers have to buy into those same platforms. Yeah?
For the 4 steps up on your slide, are you wrapping every relationship? Are they just communicating event data? Or do they know they're transacting in grains and not dollars?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as they're concerned at this point, it is US dollars. I mean, we do explain that to them. But whether or not it's commonly known, I don't know for sure. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Like, do you wrap those relationships, or are you just collecting all the data? And
Yeah.
the customers are free to set their relationships with whoever?
Oh, yeah. So we're not actually involved at all in the building of relationships. We just handle the payments, right? So the way we kind of filter out like which chains go where is just do they occur? Does that entity occur inside of the chain?
So you pay everyone?
We pay everyone. And that's our enforcement mechanism. You know, that's how we get the data.
And there didn't used to be a person in that role. It was the customer before?
That's right. Well, it was just like very traditional stuff. You know, the advertiser has their representative, and they do a bunch of business. At the end of the month, everybody calls each other and they argue. And what ends up happening is pretty terrible. You may wonder like what the incentive is for the people in the middle, because it seems like we're coming after them in some way. But currently, it's a big mess for them as well. They often will go months without getting paid. And often they'll have to take bank loans to pay upstream to cover what they owe out so they can keep doing business. And then they have to pay interest on that. So what we do, and I meant to make a slide, but I didn't, our payments is a little different. So traditionally, you know, obviously the advertiser is going to pay their agency is going to pay their DSP, blah, blah, so on and so forth. What we do is we withdraw all the money from the advertiser, and we immediately pay out everybody in the chain at one time. Yeah.
So in providing a centralized ledger, you're essentially providing a private blockchain, right? Where
Yeah, this kind of occurs in 2 places, and a lot of the reason for that is, A, it allows us to let our customers use things they're used to, like web interfaces. Then there's the channel-based ledgers, and that's more of a Hyperledger thing. And that allows you to set up essentially private blockchains, private ledgers with any party you want.
and you as a company, your business model is that you get transaction fees from.
That's right.
validating.
That's correct. Yes.
And because you're private, how is the data that you're providing? How is that validated? I mean, in a public blockchain, it can be done, you know, by mining people in network. But
Yep.
How does that happen?
Sure. So he asked how is our data validated? And for now, in our current system, we lean a lot on the payments kind of enforcing the correct information. But of course, there's a door open for errors to be made. So we actually are leaning a lot on the verification providers to help us with that. But it's something we'll work towards, you know, getting more and more stuff onto a more shared ledger at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned verification providers.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you looked into, I was just reading about the curated registries and specifically AdChain. Does that fit in anywhere, or have you read up on AdChain at all? Or, I mean, if not, it's like that we've all staked, some token on that we say, oh yeah, like they don't have a bunch of bot traffic, so they're on the list. And then, have you looked at this?
Yeah, we don't really engage with that directly at this point. That certainly could play into the decision making for any advertiser or any company in the middle. We are working with data from things like ad.text, which allows you to identify, is this party actually allowed to serve ads for this domain, right? So if you're an SSP serving ads for a particular domain, this is a mechanism to help reduce spoofing, because if you're not on the list, technically you shouldn't be allowed to serve ads for them. Yeah.
So what side of the marketplace are your customers? Publisher side? Who actually pays you? And what's your pitch to them? What's your value add that you would offer them?
Yeah, so we first engaged with an exchange, AppNexus. They're an exchange and SSP. And the whole thing with them is, A, they hate getting paid in the manner that I talked about before. And also, they see this change coming to the market. They think transparency is going to have a huge impact and it's important. And they want to kind of lead the charge. I think, ultimately, it's going to come down to who's providing value. Again, it's not us to judge, but we're going to provide this information. And whoever's providing value will prevail. So they feel confident that they are. Further, we're talking with everybody else as well. We made a big focus on advertisers, so we have AppNexus and Bayer, I mentioned, some publishers as well.
So all sides?
We plan to engage everybody, yeah. It's very helpful for us if everybody is integrated as closely as possible. Yeah?
Dan, you mentioned you're verifying identities. You showed that idea of an Amino chain for a single impression, like 4 or 5 steps on the way. So with regards to identity, are each step along that way being signed by public, private key signatures? Is that how you guys are doing that, or what's the
That's correct. Yeah, in virtually all circumstances, that happens. There are some weird types of calls that are kind of like placeholder calls that get filled in with resolution calls later. But yeah, virtually everybody signs their own stuff.
So I'm wondering, are you guys using elliptic curve signing to do that? Or the reason I'm asking is because at that kind of scale, I'm curious about like 1 million transactions per second.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so inside that streaming platform, that streaming system I talked about, we do the verification there, and I can't talk specifically, but we do have an SLA, which allows us to not have to check everything before we determine there is a problem, and then we could, of course, once we decided there's a problem, we can go back and.
Sorry, SLA is that?
Service level agreement. So we have an agreement where we say, we promise you we will catch fraud before it hits this amount. So we have an algorithm that keeps us within that SLA. And of course, once we've discovered anything, it's a super, super low dollar amount. And I should point out that in this industry, having 10% discrepancy is totally fine. So we're way, 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 way under that, of course. And once we've determined there is any fraud occurring, we could go back and check more stuff and invalidate larger blocks. But that's a very good question, yeah, because it would be very expensive. Yes?
What are the advertisers on the chart, the actual advertising agencies?
Who are the agencies?
Where are the agencies on your flow chart?
They're kind of, she asked where the agencies are on this flow. They're grouped in with they really represent AT&T and Bayer. Yeah, but if I put up some agency names, nobody would know who they are, so I didn't. Any other questions? Has anybody else worked with Hyperledger at all? No? Cool. Yeah, what's up?
How are you guys different than basic attention token? Is it like similar?
Yeah, that's not really an area of expertise for me personally, but would you mind elaborating on that?
Basic attention token pretty much they do kind of like mobile advertising to just try to like block the advertising pretty much.
they try and block the advertising.
Yeah. Well, they get paid from the advertising. Basically, they can actually provide the other side feedback. It would be how much is the user actually interacting or engaging with the advertising.
Yeah.
So you'd be able to quantify, not only you prevent fraud and abuse and provide some efficiency to the system on the advertising side, but on the viewing side, that's where basic attention token will fit in, where the user would engage and you would be able to judge how much time each user is working, and then the user would actually be able to receive some type of reimbursement for that activity.
Yeah, I know there are some companies in that space. I think that's something we could consider doing, but more likely we'd probably engage another company that does that and make them a verification provider of sorts, more like. I mean, I can't speak for business development, but
You gotta take care of one side of the business.
yeah. Cool. Anybody else? Thanks.
All right, thanks Daniel, that was great. I guess we're gonna hang out here for a little bit and keep socializing, but once we start heading out, just a reminder, we'll be going to Tier 9 for the unofficial after party. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for the answer about verification. It's a really good answer.
Yeah, were you able to stop and save that recording?
You know what? It's probably up on this screen over here, isn't it? Is that how
Great, by the way. Thanks a lot.
oh, thank you. I do, yeah.
My brother is in digital advertising in New York.
Awesome. We have a small satellite office there. I'm actually from New York. I just moved here in November, but
You mind if I wrap that up?
yeah, if you could figure it out, go for it, man.
I mean,
Yeah, so they're Gary Bowen, and then
Cool.
he does digital platforms. Like they're doing with digital newspapers like gaming and like restaurants and like tracking.